Hello everyone, my name is Pixlriffs and welcome back to the Minecraft Survival Guide. This video will be separate from the main Survival Guide world, but before we jump into that world, I wanted to make a video that is basically a glossary of terms. Like the real world, Minecraft seems simple on the surface, but is very deep and complex once you get to know it. As you get more familiar with Minecraft, you might hear a bunch of community jargon being thrown around, and players using terminology you haven't encountered yet. I've been playing the game for 7 years at this point, and I myself watch players who've been in the game for even longer, so even when I'm explaining a basic concept in this game, sometimes I can't help but use words or phrases that might go over some people's heads. And so I've decided to make this video as a reference guide for anyone who hears words like chunks, Z-axis, biomes, or mobs and doesn't know what that means, at least in the context of Minecraft. Let's start with dimensions. Minecraft has 3 dimensions: the overworld, the nether, and the end. We'll learn about these in the main series, but you'll typically be spending most of your time in the overworld, which is the one which most closely resembles our own world. Natural terrain, blue sky, and even some animals you might recognize. The nether is Minecraft's underworld, a realm full of fire and lava and scary pig people, but it also has some valuable loot, some of which is required for you to make progress in the game, and with clever use of portals, you can use the nether to cross vast distances in the overworld. Finally, the end is a dimension of floating islands guarded by the Ender Dragon. Right now, the end is a desolate, moon-like landscape populated with alien-looking plants and occasional structures which contain some of the most valuable items in the game. The position of everything in the Minecraft world, the player, blocks in the terrain, farm animals, loot chests, everything like that, is stored using coordinates. And while it's possible to play Minecraft without knowing much about coordinates or using them at all, it will probably help to know the basics. Coordinates are a collection of 3 values: X, Y, and Z. If you're drawing a graph on paper, the x-axis is the one that goes from left to right, and the same is true in Minecraft. The x-axis goes from west to east. As you travel east, you go further away from 0 in that direction, and your x value goes up. If you travel west instead, your x value goes down, and once you pass 0, it goes into the negative numbers on the x-axis. The y-axis on our paper graph is the one that goes up and down, and once again, the same is true in Minecraft. The further up you travel in the world vertically, the higher your y value goes. And if you go caving and travel deeper into the earth, your y value decreases until you pass the 0 coordinate and head into the negative. The y-axis is also linked to some of the geology of Minecraft, and it determines where certain materials can be found. For example, when you travel into lower negative coordinates on the y-axis, that's when you start to have a chance of finding diamonds. For that reason, we'll be referring to the y-axis quite frequently, so it's often important to know what it means. The Z-axis is where the paper graph becomes a 3D shape. Because we can't just travel east, west, up and down in Minecraft, we can also travel north and south, which is movement along the Z-axis. Moving north takes this into negative values, and moving south goes into positive values. In-game, your coordinates can be found among the debug information that appears when you press F3, and while there are other, more immersive ways of navigating the Minecraft world, coordinates are a useful tool to precisely locate something you wanted to return to, or to get your bearings in a landscape that can feel disorientating. We may also refer to certain ranges of coordinates by specific names. For example, sea level, where the player typically spawns, occurs around Y64 in the overworld. Minecraft is a world made up of cubes. It's safe to say the majority of materials you'll be handling will be in cube form. But there are other shapes too, like fences, panes of glass, doors, or cacti. However, the community has taken to classifying anything you can place in the world, generally speaking, as a block. This is kind of shorthand for something that takes up the space of a block. If it can be placed in the world, has a fixed position, doesn't move around, you can probably call it a block. And it's incredibly rare for two types of blocks to occupy the same space. For example, if I place a torch here, I can't then put a block of material in the same space, even though it's possible for me to walk straight through the torch itself. Technically, even the air itself is made out of blocks. It's an unobtainable invisible block used to define the empty space where another block could go later. But that's getting a little too complicated for what we need to know. As a rule of thumb, each block in Minecraft is supposed to be 1 cubic meter. You will also find that most blocks in Minecraft ignore gravity. There are some, like sand or gravel, which are affected by gravity, and others which need a supporting block before they can be placed in the world, but will not be destroyed when the supporting block is taken away. We'll probably pick up rules like this as we progress through the Minecraft survival guide, so don't feel like you have to memorize all of that right now. We often refer to areas in Minecraft as chunks. This is most commonly found in your video settings, where the render distance and simulation distance sliders control the area of Minecraft which you can see and in which the game processes events in real time. If you set your render distance to 8 chunks, it renders the world in a radius of 8 chunks from the player. A chunk is an area of the world 16 blocks wide on the X and Z axes, but 384 blocks tall on the y-axis, from the bottom of the world at y-64 to the top of the world at y-320. This is also divided into 16 block tall sub-chunks, but typically when we talk about a chunk, we're talking about the full height of the world and a 16 by 16 area. When a player is in or near a chunk, if you can see it or if it is within your simulation distance, it's called a loaded chunk. On the flip side, unloaded chunks are areas which are outside of your render distance and simulation distance. Nothing will happen in those chunks until you get near enough to load them. When you leave, anything in these chunks is effectively put in stasis until you return. Some of the chunks of the world will stay permanently loaded under certain conditions. The spawn chunks are the area around the player's initial spawn point, also called the world spawn. This is not necessarily at the 0, 0 coordinate in the exact center of the world, but Minecraft usually tries to spawn you close to that location. It's worth noting that in a single-player Minecraft world, these spawn chunks will always be loaded if you're in the overworld, even if you aren't anywhere near them. On a multiplayer server, the spawn chunks stay loaded at all times, even when players aren't on the server or are in other dimensions like the Nether or the End. We won't need to worry about the area of the spawn chunks for a while, but in case you want to use this as a reference, the spawn chunks are a 19 by 19 area in which entities will be processed. One chunk out from that is a 21 by 21 area in which blocks will be processed, and beyond that, a 23 by 23 area which is the border of the spawn chunks. Normal rules will apply to everything else outside of that area. On a somewhat less technical level, the environment of Minecraft is split up into biomes. These are areas with different climate, geology, and biology. You'll find unique and different resources in many of them, different trees and terrain, more abundant resources, and a variety of different animals and monsters. Even areas of the ocean are split into different biomes, and starting in Minecraft 1.18, which is part 2 of the Caves and Cliffs update, cave biomes have been added to Minecraft as well. Players often refer to Minecraft's various creatures as mobs. You might think this is a collective term, like a mob of zombies, but the word mob here can refer to a single animal, monster, villager, and so forth. It's short for mobile entity, a term that is commonly used in gaming. A mob is anything which is supposed to feel alive with its own sense of intelligence. Mobs can loosely be divided into several categories. Hostile, meaning anything which attacks the player on sight. Neutral, which includes any mobs which only attack the player when the player provokes them somehow. And passive, mobs which won't damage the player under any circumstances. Aside from mobs, there's another category of things in Minecraft which we call entities. These are typically things that don't have AI of their own, but can be moved around, interacted with, and don't occupy or can overlap with block space. This might sound kind of confusing, so here are a few examples. Boats and minecarts the player can ride in, items you've dropped on the ground, paintings, item frames, armor stands, and projectiles like snowballs or arrows. Once again, you don't need to memorize all of these lists of things which are entities versus things which are blocks. We will often cover that in the course of the Minecraft Survival Guide itself. When you break blocks, slay mobs, loot a chest, or craft something, you're probably going to get some items out of it. These will be stored in your inventory, and if you get lots of the same item, it'll typically be grouped together in the same inventory space. A group of items like this is called a stack, regardless of how many items is in it, but most items stack up to 64, at which point it's a full stack, and you need to start another stack to carry more of that material. You'll often hear players referring to full stacks as just stacks for short. For example, if someone is aiming to collect 5 stacks of cobblestone, they probably want 5 full stacks of 64. Some items like eggs or empty buckets will only stack to 16. Others like tools are unstackable. You can only store one of them per slot in your inventory. Providing a full list of those here would get pretty long, so you're better off figuring these out as you go. Lighting is an important aspect of Minecraft because most hostile mobs will not appear in areas which are well lit. The player encounters lots of different blocks which can provide light, but many of them emit a different light level, numbered from 1 to 15, with 1 being the dimmest and 15 being the brightest. Starting with update 1.18, most hostile mobs won't spawn unless there is complete darkness, so it's fairly intuitive for new players to make an area safe, but it is often useful to know how much light something emits, so when we talk about this in the series, we'll be referring to this as light level. The player has 20 health points, represented by 10 heart icons. Players lose half a heart from this meter if they take a single point of damage, and losing all 20 points means you're dead and have to respawn. To regenerate health naturally, the player's hunger needs to be full, which is achieved by making sure you eat food regularly. This refills the hunger icons, which people have lots of names for: drumsticks, ham shanks, chicken legs, or whatever this looks like to you. Hunger will deplete slowly while the player is active, moving around, jumping, mining blocks, or it can deplete more suddenly if you take damage. There is a third value behind the scenes which isn't represented visually anywhere. It's called saturation, and in basic terms, it controls how long it takes before you get hungry again. Think of it like a second invisible hunger bar, which has to deplete before your main hunger bar will start to drop. Some food items have high saturation. For example, eating a cooked pork chop will mean you don't get hungry for a while, but just eating snack foods like a cookie or a slice of melon often means you'll get hungry more quickly. Game ticks and redstone ticks aren't concepts you need to worry about, especially in the early stages of Minecraft, but if you're interested in getting technical, here is a fairly simple breakdown for you. There are 20 game ticks in a second. Each game tick allows the game to process what's going on around the player. Things like mob spawning, whether you're breaking blocks, and anything that has to interact with anything else. An easy example of this is a hopper minecart, which, when it picks up items from a container above it, collects them at a rate of 20 per second. It's collecting items as fast as the game can process them. The other good example is the daylight cycle. Minecraft's day and night cycle lasts for exactly 20 real-time minutes. 10 minutes of daytime, 10 minutes of nighttime. If there are 20 game ticks in 1 second, then 1 real-time minute produces 1,200 ticks, so 20 minutes is 24,000 game ticks. This divides conveniently into the 24-hour clock we're used to in real life, and so we can calculate that 1 hour in Minecraft time is 1,000 ticks, or about 50 seconds of real time. We use the term redstone tick to describe the lengths of time the game uses when processing redstone circuits. A redstone tick is 2 game ticks, or 1/10 of a second. When you add delay to a circuit by adjusting a redstone repeater, you can delay the signal by up to 4 redstone ticks, meaning the repeater adds 0.4 seconds of delay to the output signal. Lining up 3 repeaters to add 10 redstone ticks of delay will delay the signal by exactly 1 second. When redstone components produce power, we often measure them by how many redstone ticks they produce power for. An observer detecting something in front of it will produce a pulse of redstone power for exactly 1 redstone tick, or 0.1 seconds. Pressing a stone button produces a 10-tick pulse, exactly 1 second of redstone power. A wooden button powers things for 15 ticks, or 1.5 seconds. You'll also hear random ticks come up sometimes. This is a system the game uses to make sure crops and other plants don't all grow at the same rate or at the same time. There's an element of randomness thrown in. It does affect a few other things, like copper blocks aging, grass spreading, and amethyst crystals growing too. Every game tick, the game randomly chooses a few blocks from an 8-chunk radius around the player to receive a random tick. If those blocks are affected by random ticks, like wheat growing for example, then they will grow. In test conditions, this can be sped up by changing the random tick speed game rule, which doesn't actually change how fast this happens, it changes the amount of blocks which are affected by the random tick. So the default random tick speed of 3 will randomly tick 3 blocks per chunk per game tick. A speed of 1000 will randomly tick 1000 blocks every game tick. Naturally, you won't mess with this in survival, but it can sometimes be useful to test farm designs in a creative world. The line between vanilla and modded Minecraft has become more blurry of late, but it can help to draw some distinctions between the two. Vanilla Minecraft, at its most basic, is the plain version of the game. That's the version we'll be covering in the Minecraft Survival Guide, the game you get if you do a fresh install and don't tinker with much else. Having said that, vanilla Minecraft is open to various modifications without becoming what we think of as modded Minecraft. For example, the game natively supports resource packs, which you'll sometimes hear called texture packs, but they can do much more than change the textures of blocks, mobs, and items. They can adjust sounds and music, languages and fonts, the main menu screen, and that kind of thing. They do all of this without modifying the code of the game. Likewise, vanilla Minecraft natively supports data packs, and here's where the waters get a little muddy. Data packs allow for much deeper customization of the game, allowing for new dimensions and terrain generation, changed crafting recipes and loot from chests and mobs, additional structures, and even extra biomes. Like resource packs, these are typically created by Minecraft's vast community of players, but they aren't considered mods in the traditional sense because they don't modify the base code of the game. They're all working within parameters that the vanilla game has defined for them. But since Minecraft is a sandbox game after all, tinkering with these parameters can have huge consequences. Where modded Minecraft really takes over is when the player installs something which changes the code of the game itself. Typically, this starts with a mod loader, the most popular ones being Forge and Fabric, which are designed to interface with Minecraft's vanilla code and provide a framework other mods can use to inject their code into the game. From that point on, the sky's the limit. Players have been modding Minecraft since some of the game's earliest updates, and there are mods which add huge amounts of new content to the game, including custom dimensions, otherworldly creatures, expanded food and crop systems, spellcasting, advanced machinery and tech trees, and everything in between. All this falls under the realm of modded Minecraft because it's only possible by modifying the game's code. Many of these mods would be impossible to create using the parameters of natively supported data packs. This, by the way, is one of the many reasons I don't make a modded survival guide. There are just so many mods out there, some of them with as rich a history as Minecraft itself, that I don't consider myself qualified. I kind of wouldn't know where to start. However, there are many mods which can still contribute to a vanilla experience. Usually these are quality of life mods. Some provide options to tweak and improve the game's performance, especially on older hardware. Others install a minimap to allow for easier navigation, for example. Players who use these but don't install mods which change the gameplay, materials, progression, and themes of the game often consider their game vanilla. And you may see 1 or 2 mods like this pop up over the course of the Minecraft Survival Guide, but never at the risk of this becoming what you'd call a modded Minecraft series. Hopefully this video has provided you with a foundation to understand some of the terminology you'll hear me use naturally throughout the course of the Minecraft Survival Guide. If a term you're interested in wasn't covered in this video, it's probably because I plan to cover it at some point in the later series. So don't worry if you didn't get all the information you wanted from this video, it will probably come up as we encounter these things in the course of the Minecraft Survival Guide itself. But as usual, feel free to leave questions in the comments if there's anything from this video that you want clarified. Either I or somebody else from the community will be happy to help you out. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like on it for me and subscribe so you won't miss future videos. I'll see you guys soon, take care, bye for now.